What's going on, guys? Big Jer here with Warp Academy, and I'm excited to tell you guys today about this plugin by Waves Factory called Spectre. The reason I love this plugin so much is because it's so versatile. You could use it on a drum loop to add so much energy without really changing the volume at all. You could add it on a bass track to add mono-compatible stereo width. And of course, it sounds amazing on the master. All right, guys, let's jump into it. So what is Spectre? Well, it looks like an EQ, but it's actually a harmonic enhancer. It works a lot like an EQ, but it's fundamentally different. So I can go to one of these bands and I could raise it up like this. And as you boost that band, Spectre calculates the difference between the wet and dry signal of the EQ and uses that difference as a basis for the saturation. This gives you not only pinpoint accuracy over where you want to add harmonics, but also an overall more transparent result because you're not saturating the entire signal, you're only saturating where you want the harmonics. We're going to see all this in action, but first, let's get familiar with the GUI. Let's understand what we're looking at and exactly what Spectre has to offer us. Let's start at the top. We've got 5 available bands. We've got shelves here at the top and bottom, and then we've got 3 bells to work with. You can simply turn them on or off by clicking. That'll activate and deactivate them. This is your main window here. This is where you will choose which frequencies you want to saturate or add harmonics to. Underneath, we've got our frequency readout. We've got how much we've increased it in dB. We've got our Q, which will make this more narrow or more wide. You could also use your mouse wheel to do it as well if you just hover over and use your mouse wheel. We've got our different distortion modes right here, and we've got mid-side left and right capability as well. So not only can we decide exactly which frequencies we want to saturate, we can also decide where in the sonic image we want to saturate. All right, under that we've got our input and output, and we can link those if we'd like. We've got our mix knob here, okay? Over on this side is completely dry, over on this side is completely wet, and this is a 50-50 of both of them. And down at the bottom, we've got a couple more options. We've got our oversampling here. Good will give you 4 times oversampling. Best will give you 16 times oversampling. The GUI is sizable. We can either select which percentage we want, or we could just simply grab the corner here and expand it like that. We've got some factory presets in the middle, and then you can think of this as your intensity mode. Okay, we've got subtle, we've got medium, and then aggressive. Finally, we have a very interesting feature. Here you can de-emphasize. With de-emphasize enabled, you will not hear the EQ changes. Rather, you'll only hear the added saturation or the harmonics. With de-emphasize enabled, Spectre will compensate your boosts by subtracting the clean signal after the distortion stage. This may seem confusing or a bit technical, but now that we know what we're looking at, let's see it in action. Okay, so in this first example, we're going to look at this stadium drum beat that I've made for the build. Specifically, we'll be focusing in on the foundation loop. We're gonna see how Spectre can make that loop come more to life without actually affecting the overall volume. So let's go ahead and solo this and take a listen. All right, here we go. All right, that was a pretty significant difference. So let's take a look at how I did that with Spectre. So my goals here were I wanted to add some thickness to the bottom end while also emphasizing the kick and clap in their respected sonic field. So I went over here to span. I isolated where these parts were to find the frequency. You do that by just holding command and clicking, and let's take a listen. So I found the kick at around 110, 111. So I went over to Spectre, I set the frequency to 111, and I boosted. So I did a couple other clever things as well. The first thing I did was I went down here and switched it from stereo to mid. This means we can get specific where we're saturating and target only the mono field. And that's exactly where the kick should be anyway, so we're good. The next thing I did was set the tape algorithm. The tape algorithm adds a punchier, muffled saturation, and it's recommended for basses and kicks. Below that, you can see I used a shelf to thicken up the low end. I switched the distortion algorithm to rectify. Rectify flips the negative part of the waveform to become positive. This will change the shape of the waveform dramatically, adding tons of harmonics. Again, switching it to mid, so it's only saturating in the mono field. Finally, I went up and I found the clap. The clap was up around 1,000. Let's kind of search for it again. To me, I found the sweet spot at 1.15K, boosting it about 5 dB and adding the tube algorithm. The tube algorithm is actually a valve type soft clipping symmetrical distortion. And I set this one to the side because that's where I wanted the claps to stand out a bit. Finally, at the bottom, I changed two things. The first was the intensity mode. I switched it to medium because I thought this loop needed a little bit extra love. And then probably the coolest thing, the reason that the volume stays the same is because I used de-emphasize mode. Now we already talked about what that does, but in a nutshell, when this is enabled, you won't hear any EQ boosts. You'll only be hearing the harmonics that you added. This next one is a really cool and unique trick that I picked up from Dan Worrell. I'm gonna do my own spin on it, but the concept remained the same. First of all, let's hear what it does, and then I'll explain how I did it. So we have a bass part here, and I'm going to solo the bass part and play it with and without Spectre. I'll start out with it off and then turn it on. All right, this is a really, really neat trick. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and just turn on two bands. We're gonna make a really high and narrow peak, somewhere that you think sounds interesting, and then we're gonna actually set it to the left, so it only is saturating the left side, okay? And then we're gonna do one right next to it. I found another cool spot that sounded interesting, and then I went down and I set that to right, okay? So now we're hearing subtle differences in our left and right ear. This is adding a really nice widening effect to the top of the bass, all right? So in case you were wondering, this doesn't actually cause any phase issues either. I'll actually play it one more time and I will engage and disengage mono, and you'll see that nothing really disappears. One other thing I'd like to call your attention to is that I am using the link on the input output. Now it doesn't look like anything's happening right now, but when I unlink it, you'll see that it has set the output level to the inverse of the input level. Watch. See what I'm saying? So for the last example, I put an instance of Spectre on the master. I know a lot of us out there love to use saturation on our master, and there's a lot of methods and ways to go about this. Let me show you how I did it. You may also notice that I have an instance of span open. When I'm mixing and mastering, I always use a reference track to help me get close to a mix that I think is great. So let me press play. I have Spectre turned off, but at this point, I want you to look at span. This is a small section of the drop. Okay, cool. So what we're looking at here is two different curves. The pink curve is the reference song, and the blue curve is my song. If you guys aren't using span or don't know how to set up span like this, Warp Academy actually has an amazing video on this, and we'll leave a link for that in the description. And seeing as how span is free, you should all go check that video out and download span right away and start using it. But after looking at this, I'm noticing that I'm very close to the curve of my reference track, but there's a couple of spots that I'm a little bit low in, okay? I'm a little low right here at around 150. I'm a little low right here at around 400. I'm a little low right here at around 800, and I could use a little bit of love up in this area. And this is exactly what I use Spectre to help me fill in. As you can see right here, I have a band at 150, I have a band at 850, and I have a band at 400, as well as a bit of a shelf boost up here. Let me go ahead and turn this on. We'll reset our meter, and let's see how it helped us out. There you go. You can see that this really filled in all those sections that we wanted. And this is just a bit better than using EQ because it's going to give you more of a vibe. You're not just boosting those frequencies, remember, you are adding harmonics as well. One final thing is to remember that it's very important to engage oversampling, especially when we're boosting higher frequencies. This is going to get rid of any type of aliasing that might occur. So let's take a quick listen to this before and after. That's a really big difference, and it filled in all the spots that I wanted, allowing me to kind of tonally shape my master just the way I wanted. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something. If you have any questions about Spectre or anything really, drop it in the chat and we'll get right back to you. Other than that, I'll catch you guys later.